what the US-Iran war might look like. At this point, it's hard to be very precise about a hypothetical full-blown conflict. We know it would feature a series of moves and counter-moves. We know it'd be very messy and confusing, and we know it'd be extremely deadly. But unlike with the path to war, it's less useful to offer a play-by-play of what could happen. So with that in mind, it's better to look at what the US and Iranian war plans would likely be, to better understand the devastation each could exact. After President Donald Trump ordered the killing of Iran's top general, Qassem Soleimani, many have been questioning how the country would fare up against the strong military in the world. As Iran mourns the general's death, officials from both countries have exchanged stark warnings, putting military forces and allies from both countries on high alert on Friday. According to Global Firepower, a military ranking website, the US is ranked as having the world's strongest military, while Iran falls behind in 14th place out of 137 countries considered in the annual review. However, Iran's strong network of regional proxies and allies poses a great threat to the US targets and are expected to play a major role in rising tensions between the two nations. A breakdown of Iran's military power. Iran has an estimated 523,000 active personnel in the Army, Navy, Air Force and the IRGC. But with a population of more than 83 million in the country, it has the ability to draw on more manpower if necessary, 324,105. A breakdown of the US's military power. The US is widely accepted as having the world's strongest military. Its powers are considerably stronger than Iran's, with 1,281,900 active personnel and an extra 144,872,845 in available manpower. It has a staggering $716 billion US dollar, 547.6 billion Great British pounds defense budget. And although it has less missiles than Iran, 7, they are far more advanced, including the Trident D5 and an intercontinental ballistic missile, the ICBM, according to Missile Threat. It is understood that the US and Russia possess more than 90% of the world's nuclear warheads, and the two nations have almost equal numbers. The nation also has the largest air and naval force, the latter measured by tonnage, in the world. It boasts 48,422 combat tanks, rocket projectors, self-propelled artillery, armoured fighting vehicles and towered artillery. In the air power, the US currently has 10,170 assets and 415 in naval forces. How the US might try to win the war. The US strategy would almost certainly involve using overwhelming air and naval power to beat Iran into submission early on. You don't poke the beehive, you take the whole thing down, Goldenberg said. The US military would bomb Iranian ships, parked warplanes, missile sites, nuclear facilities, and training grounds, as well as launch cyber attacks on much of the country's military infrastructure. The goal would be to degrade Iran's conventional forces within the first few days and weeks, making it harder for Tehran to resist American strength. The plan definitely makes sense as an opening salvo, experts say, but it will come nowhere close to winning the war. It won't help that a sustained barrage of airstrikes will likely lead to thousands of Iranians dead, among them innocent civilians. That, among other things, could galvanize Iranian society against the US and put it firmly behind the regime, even though it has in many ways treated the population horribly over the decades in power. There's another risk. A 2002 war game showed that Iran could sink an American ship and kill US sailors, even though the US Navy is far more powerful. If the Islamic Republic's forces succeeded in doing that, it would provide a searing image that could serve as propaganda coup for the Iranians. Washington won't gather the same amount of enthusiasm for destroying Iranian warships. That's what's supposed to happen. Trump has already signaled he doesn't want to send troops into Iran or even spend a long time fighting the country. That tracks with his own inflictions to keep the US out of foreign wars, particularly in the Middle East. But with hawkish aides at his sides, like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, there's a chance that they could convince him not to look weak and to go all in and grasp victory. Iran has nearly 3 times the amount of people Iraq did in 2003 when the war began, and is about 3.5 times as big. In fact, it's the world's 17th largest country, with territory greater than France, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain and Portugal combined. The geography is also treacherous. It has small mountain ranges along some of its borders. Entering from the Afghanistan side in the east would mean traversing 2 deserts. Trying to get in from the west could also prove difficult even with Turkey, a NATO ally, as a bordering nation. After all, Ankara wouldn't let the US use Turkey to invade Iraq, and its relations with Washington have only soured since. The US could try to enter Iran the way Saddam Hussein did during the Iran-Iraq war near a water pass bordering Iran's southwest. But it's swampy, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet there, and relatively easy to protect. Plus, an invading force would run up against the Zagros mountain after passing through, just like Saddam's forces did. It's for these reasons that the private intelligence firm Stratfor called Iran a fortress back in 2011. If Trump chose to launch an intrusion, he'd likely need around 1.6 million troops to take control of the capital and country, a force so big it would overwhelm America's ability to host them in regional bases. By contrast, America never had more than 180,000 service members in Iraq. And there's a human cost. A US-Iran war would likely lead to thousands or hundreds of thousands of dead. Trying to forcibly remove the country's leadership, experts say, might drive the total into millions. That helps explain why nations in the region hope they don't see a fight. Goldenberg, who travelled recently to meet with the officials in the Gulf, said that none of them wanted a US-Iran war. European nations will also worry greatly about millions of refugees streaming into the continent, which would put immense pressure on the governments already dealing with the fallout of the Syrian refugee crisis. Israel would also worry about Iranian proxies targeting it. Meanwhile, countries like Russia and China, both friendly to Iran, would try to curtail the fighting and exploit it at the same time, the Century Foundation's Hannah told me. China depends heavily on its goods travelling through the Straits of Hormuz, so it would probably call for calm and Tehran not to close down the waterway. Russia would likely demand restraint as well, but use the opportunities to solidify its ties with the Islamic